So CCC 101 final requirement. This is the final project of our semester of our course in CCC 101. So to begin with, I will be giving a brief overview of the basics of where the programming started, which is the history of computer. We will be talking about computer itself, and as we progress, I will be introducing the basics of C++ programming and other types of elements in C++. So let's begin with talking about computers. So first of all, what is a computer? Well, a computer is an electronic device capable of performing commands. So when we say an electronic devices, these varies computer. It can be a laptop, a tablet, etc. So the basic commands that a computer performs, pwede tayong mag-input ng data, and then it outputs or displays the result. So it also has a storage. It also has storage, and then it also performs arithmetic operations. That's why we also have the calculator and logical operations. So now, since modern day na tayo, computer has progressed, has advanced na marami na siyang additional applications to perform. May mga computer pa nga na pang gamer, 'di ba? Built for gamers lang. So they are uh, powerful and reliable and easy to use. Now, although that varies na din kung ano ang type of computers na gamit mo as well as its processor. 'Di ba may Core i7, Core i5, Core i3, Core i2. Nakadepende lang yan sa processor natin. Pero regardless, all computers have the same basic elements. And one is that a computer has two main components of a computer system. These are the hardware and the software. So a hardware is a major component. Hardware includes the central processing unit. Ito yung CPU na tinatawag natin. And this is, as we all know, the brain of the computer where it all starts. And if you are not aware of this central processing unit is the most expensive piece of hardware in a computer. Kaya siya yung pinaka-importante. Siya yung brain. Siya yung brain ng computer. Uh, so the more powerful na the more powerful the CPU, which is the brain of the computer, the faster the computer. So dito naman tayo, main memory, MM, or as we all know, or as we all called as RAM, which is random access memory. Ito yung storage directly sa CPU niya. So we also have input and output devices. Input, example ay yung monitor, printer, secondary stage. That's rather the output. Ang input natin ay keyboard, mouse, secondary storage. Output naman ay yung like such things are monitor, printer, other types of outside the scope of a computer. So now we move on to the software naman tayo. So software naman, these are programs written to perform specific tasks. Now there are two types of programs, system programs and application programs. So sa software naman, uh, they are written to perform specific tasks. Kumbaga, word processors are also are programs that we use to write letters, papers, and even books. So uh, they are made to perform specific tasks. Now, all software is written in programming language. System programs control sa ika nga dito. So system program control uh, without an operating system rather, the computer is useless kasi wala siyang operating system. Monitors na overall, siya yung nag-monitor ng overall activity of the computer, and ito rin yung nagbibigay ng services. Now, kung may program tayo, may application programs din naman tayo which perform specific task. So, word processors, spreadsheets, and games are example of application programs. Now we move on to the language of the computer. So, have you ever wondered ano ang kinakalabasan pag nag-i-input kayo sa keyboard ninyo? Paano sila nagsisend ng signals? Have you ever wondered paano yung nagta-translate sa computer? So how does it work? Well, it involves electric signals. Language of computers have different signals to perform in order to translate the types of language we use. So electrical signals are used inside the computer to process information. So kung electrical engineering ka, you must be aware of that term kasi ito yung pag-aaralan ninyo. Now we have two types of electrical signals. These are the analog and digital. So analog signals are continuous waves, forms used to represent such things as sound. Audio tapes, for example, store data in analog signals. Digital signals naman, these are representing information with a sequence of number zeros and 1. Kaya digital na eh. So, ito. The digit 0 or 1 is called a binary digit or bit. A sequence of 8 bits is called a byte. Diba, familiar kayo sa kilobyte, terabyte, megabyte, MB, or kung tinatawag nila, ito siya, yung binary digit. So, the most commonly used encoding scheme on personal computers is the 7-bit or what we call the American Standard Code for Information Interchange or ASCII code. ASCII data, which is a data set consists of 128 characters numbered from 0 to 127. So the next step towards making programming easier was to devise high-level language. So now that we know how machine language is translated into letters or what we call assembly language, what we consider as our language, we will then apply it to the high-level language, which is devised for individual machine instructions of a program. So, example ng high-level language is yung C++ program, C program, Java, Python, etc. Kung ano man yan. They are based on a high-level language. So, to run on a computer, these instructions first needs to be translated into a machine language, hence the compiler. So yun yung trabaho ng compiler. It is a program that translates instructions written in a high-level language into the equivalent machine language. Familiar naman tayo dito, di ba? Lagi natin itong ginagamit. We are using this term always in the C++, which is the most basic high-level language that we are using currently in this semester. So, yun, so the machine language gets processed into our program. In our case, we use C++. So, next. Here we view the steps required to process a program written in C++. So first, it starts with the editor, with his preprocessor. Dito tayo nagta-type ng ano natin. Then it goes to the compiler. So if the compiler detects a syntax error, it goes back. Hindi siya mag-execute. So dito naman makikita mo yung library. Ito yung header na nilalagyan natin. Tapos may linker siya. And then maglo-load. And then last step, which is the execution. This is just the basic steps required to process a program written in C++, which is what we are using. So since we are talking about C++, before we dive into programming, I want to give you a general idea of what C++ is. So, C++ basic. C++ is a programming language that was developed for general purpose of programming. So we might not be aware of the websites that we use, kung ano mang websites yung ginagamit natin, pero majority of them, if you are not aware, are built in C++. Websites such as Facebook, YouTube, Google, yan yung mga famous C++ program built in C++. Now, in the following slides, I will briefly discuss the basic elements of C++ and its concept of running a C++ program. So, let's start with the basics. We have the rules. These are rules of C++ because before we execute a program, we should know the set of rules that were made in a C++ program. So here we have the syntax rule, which tells statements that are legal and valid. Kumbaga, ito yung instruction natin. Di naman pwedeng basta-basta na lang tayo mag-i-encode ng type of language tapos bigla siyang mag-execute. Siyempre, dapat may rules and instructions and regulations din. So, here naman sa semantic rule, this only determines the meaning of the instructions. Ito lang yung parang guide niya. Guide of the instructions. Steps, kumbaga. So, basics of the program. Since we're talking about basics, let's move to the basics. Types of error in C++. So, as you can see here, in C++ we have different kind of errors. This error can be categorized into 5 different types. So, as you can see, syntax error, which we already know this. Kasi lagi naman tayong gumagamit ng C++ and nagkaka-syntax error. This is the most basic error that is occurring in C++. I remember the first error that I had and nagpanic talaga ako kasi hindi ko alam anong ginagawa ko that time. So, next naman is the runtime error. These kind of errors are occurred when the program is executing. As this is not compilation error, so the compilation will be successfully done. We can check this error if we try to dive a number with 0. So, ito naman yung runtime error. Alam naman natin yung runtime, di ba? Nag-occur siya pag pag nag-execute na yung program. Pag hindi kumbaga hindi siya nag-error, we can check, makikita rin natin yung sa error niya. So, linker error naman, this kind of error are occurred when the program is compiled successfully and trying to link the different object files with the main object file. When this error is occurred, the executable is not generated. So, for example, some wrong function prototyping. Kumbaga, nagkamali ka ng function prototyping or incorrect header file. So, yun yung main link error, main objective of the link error. Pag may maling function ka na nasulat. So, if the main function is written as main with a capital M-A-M, this will generate a linked error. So, ganun talaga. So, we have to be very careful sa letters na ginagamit natin kasi na one wrong alphabet or one letter would cause the link error. So, logical error naman, ito yung hindi natin nakikita. Basically, ito yung magra-run yung program pero na hindi natin mapapansin. So, this is the hardest thing that we have to be logical. Kumbaga, we have to think logically so that we can avoid this kind of error because sometimes we put a semicolon after a loop that is syntactically correct, but we will create one blank loop. In that case, it will show desired output. So, gets nyo naman. Semantic error naman, this error occurs when the statements written in the program are not meaningful to the compiler. So, pag yung compiler may ma-detect siya na statements na hindi naman magagamit sa program, ay mag-error siya and magsasabi siya. So next, this is the basics of the C++ program. Ito yung this is like the starting first 4 lines that we encode in our compiler. Ito yung pinaka basic. So kung hindi mo pa to alam at the end of the semester, it means you didn't learn anything. You haven't learned anything. Kung kopya ka ng kopya, di mo to alam. This is the first 4 lines that we encode in our compiler. The hashtag include IOStream, which tells the compiler to include file. This is a library basically, which must be the first thing we encode kasi this contains basic elements and declaration used to manipulate the program, kumbaga. And this contains elements such as cout, cin, and other things that requires in a C++ program. So it is the first thing that we write kasi the compiler reads from the first to the bottom. So ito talaga yung first na masusulat natin. Then using namespace standard, which is we need this kasi it's kind of like a shortcut. If I don't know if it allows to avoid encoding the prefix std. Kumbaga nag-cout ka, hindi mo na kailangan maglagay ng std sa before writing cout. Automatic na siya. Kasi na every statement we have to write std to so parang shortcut lang siya. Ganun. Masyado kasing hassle lang siya. Kaya yun. And the third line we need to consider is the int main, or the what we call the main function of our program. Kaya siya int kasi na it returns data of an integer type. Now this line involves the use of function, which I will discuss later as well. Also note that the braces we have in the int main, that is where the body of the main function is. So kung may braces na, di ba may braces siya? So yun yung body of the main function. And lastly, the fourth line, which is the most important statement of a program, the return 0. This statement returns a value from a function and it indicates the finishing of a function. This is the last thing that we input basically. So next slide. Ito naman tayo sa comments. I'm sure marunong na kayo gumamit ng comments. So what is a comment, by the way? Comments is for readers to read, and this is not for the compiler. Kumbaga, this is basically you can write anything you want as long as it is inside this, as you can see, this column and dash. What do you call this? Star dash. So I'll explain what the difference is between the both of them. This comment also makes the program more readable by providing details to the reader. So, ganun siya. So, as you can see, we have two types of comment. Itong dash line is only a single line comment. So, kung gagamit ka ng multiple line comment or mahaba yung susulat mo, gumamit ka ng dash star dash line. Comment rather. So, ganun siya, ganun gamitin. Ganun gamitin yung comments. It is used to make our program readable, kumbaga. So, here we have the input and output. The two instances cout in C++ and cin in C++ of IOStream are used very often for printing outputs and taking inputs respectively. These two are the most basic methods of taking input and printing the output. To use cin and the cout in C++, one must include the header file IOStream in the program, which I have discussed to you earlier. So ito yung pinaka-basic na input and output uh, print, printing in the compiler. As you can see, cin is what we type in our keyboard, and then it goes to our program, and then it goes to screen, which is the cout. Cout. It is the output. So mag-cin ka, input, mag-output ka, cout. Next. Oh, by the way, cout and cin are considered identifiers. Next slide, we have the special symbols naman. Basically, special symbols are these, as you can see, different types of symbols. The first row includes mathematical symbols for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Ito yung special symbols natin sa C++ programming, which is hindi mo basta-bastang magagamit kasi may different definitions sila and different tasks to perform. So you must know all of these special symbols. Now, first row is mathematical symbols for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The second row consists of punctuation marks taken from English grammars. Note that the comma is also a special symbol. In C++, commas are used to separate items in a list. Semicolons naman are special symbols and are used to end a C++ statement. Kaya lagi tayong naka-semicolon. Every statement, every type of everything that we write in C++ ends with semicolon. So note that the blank, which is not shown above, is also used as a special symbol. Yes, you can create a blank by pressing the space bar only once on the keyboard. So the third row consists of token. Tokens made up of two characters that are regarded as a single symbol, which we will be discussing later din naman. So, no character can come between the two characters in a token, what we call token, not even a blank. So, di mo siya masiseparate. Malalaman natin anong uses niyan later. They are operators. So, the basic of C++ program are reserved word symbols. Keywords. Some of the reserved words symbol include the following. Wait lang. Check kung naka-record tayo. Ayun, naka-record. Reserved words, symbols, keywords. Some of the reserved word symbols include the following. Int, float, double, char, constant, void, return. Now, reserved words are also called keywords. So, the letters that make up our reserved words are also lowercase. So, hindi siya pwedeng uppercase, lowercase lang siya. So, like the special symbols, each is considered to be a single symbol. Furthermore, word symbols cannot be redefined within any program. So, as you can see, kung may special symbols tayo which different type of symbols, we also have the word symbols or what they call keywords. So, kailangan kung magta-type ka ng keywords, hindi siya magbabago. Walang pwedeng i-add dito. Kumbaga, hindi magbabago yung task of the program kahit anong isulat mo dyan. It is performed to do the specific task that they are assigned from. So, with that, we have the identifiers naman. Identifiers are names of things that appears in our program, such as variables, constants, and functions. All identifiers must obey C++ rules for identifiers. So, C++ identifier consists of letters, digits, and the underscore characters, and must begin with a letter or underscores. So, as you can see, identifier can be made on only letters digits and the underscore character. No other symbols are permitted to form an identifier. So as you can see, if you want to write an identifier, it is only letters, digits, and other underscore. Hindi pwede yung spacebar. May spacebar yung identifier mo kasi invalid siya. So as you can see, these are example of illegal identifiers. Here we can see they write an identifier, employee, salary, and there can be no space between employee salary. Kung gusto mo ng you want the identifier to be legal, wala siyang space. Dito naman, hello, the exclamation mark cannot be used in identifier. Hindi siya pwede kasi exclamation mark is also what we call a special symbol, and it is also an operator, so hindi mo pwede siyang basta-bastang gagamitin. So dito naman is 1 plus 2. As you can see, the symbol plus cannot be used in an identifier. Same case with the second. Dito naman, second, an identifier cannot begin with a digit as is written here. So, ganun yun. Kailangan mag-start siya letters kung gusto mo magsulat ng digit, and then digits naman. So, moving on, we have the C++ data types. Now, what are data types? Data types are a set of values together with a set of operations. Now, data types in C++ are mainly divided into 3 types. The first one is primary, the second one is derived, and the last one is the user-defined. Now, we will discuss primary first. As you can see in this illustration, we are familiar with these primary data types, which are the integer, character, what we call char, and boolean or the bool, floating point, which is float, double floating point, double, then a void, and then a white character. Now let's discuss what primitive data types is. Primitive data type is a fundamental data type in C++ because it becomes a building block for the structured data type. Now these data types are built-in or predefined data types and can be used directly by the user to declare variables. Now some primitive data types available in C++ are int, which is this is the keyword used for integer data types. Ito yung ginagamit natin, di ba? Pag nagde-declare tayo ng integer variable, nagsusulat muna tayo ng int bago natin isulat yung which means that int for an integer number, kumbaga. Then character naman, this data type is used for storing characters. Yes, the keyword used for the character is what we call char. So kung anong isusulat mo dito, typically, it only requires 1 byte of memory space. So, maliit siya. So, kaya kailangan natin ng string, which I will be discussing later. The difference of string is kahit anong character isulat mo. So, ito naman, boolean, or what we call bool, is used for storing logical values. Basically, napaka-importante nito when we're dealing with logical operations such as because it can store either true or false, which is very useful in C++ kasi nag-determine siya sa if a condition is true or false. Basta ganun siya. Very useful talaga to. So, dito naman tayo sa floating point or what we call float, which is a data type to nag-store siya ng decimal values. Now, the decimal values we can nakadepende yan sa atin. We can use the single precision floating point para i-determine kung ano ang decimal values na ilalagay natin. Double floating point naman, which is data type used to store double precision floating point or decimal values din. Parehas lang sila. Pero ang pinagkaiba, floating point The floating point variables requires 4 bytes of memory space, while the double floating point naman requires the double, which is 8 bytes, which is times 2 ng memory space. So kahit maraming decimal values ang isulat mo, basically mas malaki yung memory byte ng double. Void naman, ito yung the function that we've learned in the final semester. Void basically means nothing, valueless. Ginagamit to, this function is used basically kasi na it doesn't return any value. It doesn't return any, kumbaga, it represents a valueless entity. Ganun. Kumbaga, kung hindi mo siya tatawagin, parang wala lang, naka-display lang yan. Void. It is like the nothing. Parang walang laman, ganun. Next naman tayo. Sa second data types is the derived data types. Now, these data types are derived from the primitive or built-in data types, or what we call as derived data types, built-in pala. Now we have 4 types of data types, derived data types, namely function, array, pointer, and reference, which I will be discussing single-handedly later on. Then the third one is the user-defined data types. These data types are defined by the user itself, like as defining a class in C++ or a structure. Now, C++ provides the following user-defined data types, such as class, structure, union, enumeration, type-defined data type. If I'm not mistaken, we have not yet reached to this user-defined data. I mean, these class structures, or maybe I'm just not aware that we have used this, but I really am not familiar with these types of data types. So let's move on to the operators. Now, operators are very useful. Basically, in state, this is one of the most important uses of a computer. It is the ability to calculate and perform operations. Kumbaga, maggagawa tayo ng yung machine problem natin na ginagamit natin, yung conversion of Celsius to Kelvin, Kelvin to Fahrenheit. Gumagamit tayo ng operators. Or you can use the standard arithmetic operators to manipulate integral and floating point data types. There are 5 arithmetic operators. So operators tayo. Arithmetic operators, ito yung addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or the remainder. Ito yung ginagamit natin, basic operators na we are familiar with, and we are used to this na kasi we've been using this. And then here we have the relational operators naman. Now, in relational operators, as you can see, they have 2 different symbols, which is yung sinabi ko kanina, in case symbol, special symbols. Here we use operators operators. This defines as equal to. Ito naman is the not equal to. And then the third line is the less than. Then the fourth line is the less than or equal to. The fifth line is the greater than, and the last one is the greater than or equal to. So basically, our relational operators allows us to make comparisons in programs. So we use this how do I say this? We use these operators mainly Particularly pag gumagamit tayo ng loop, what we call for loop or other types of loop na gamit natin to compare the specific conditions to manipulate our conditions. Now we move on to the next operator. We have assignment operator. Now assignment operator is used to assign value to a variable. So ganun lang siya kadali, guys. Ito yung special symbols na nakita natin kanina sa last these are special symbols also. So operator such as addition and assignment, subtraction and assignment, multiplication and assignment, division and assignment, reminder and assignment. So nag-a-assign siya ng value sa variable kung anong ilalagay mo. I cannot show an example here. Pero you get the idea, you get the concept naman. And we have the logical operators. Logical operators are just not, and, or as the third line. Now, logical operators is used in the Boolean, as I've mentioned earlier. It enables you to combine logical expressions, which typically for operations that are logical. It takes only logical values such as true or false as operands and yield only logical values as results. It determines if a program is a true or false. Now we move on to control structures. Now, a computer can process a program in one of the following ways is a sequence, or as you can see here, control structures muna tayo. Control structures provides alternatives to sequential program execution and are used to alter the sequential flow of execution. So, two most common control structures are selection and repetition. Now, a computer can process a program. One of the following are selection and repetition. By executing a statement over and over using a structure, we're talking about selection dito. We can call a loop, and by calling a function. So selection muna tayo before we move on to repetition. Now, selection is the program executes particular statements depending on some conditions. So selection tayo. Repetition naman, the program repeats particular statements a certain numbers of times based on some condition. Ito yung nagre-repeat yung statements natin before we kumbaga nagre-repeat siya until it has satisfied it has met the conditions. So when we are talking about control flow, we have three types of control flow. The first one here is the statement 1, statement 2, statement 3. This is the most basic one. So here in the illustration, as you can see, the first thing we discuss is the one-way selection, and that is rather not. So statement, as you can see, is a sequence. Kumbaga direct siya. So dito naman tayo sa false selection rather. Selection, may choice ka. May statement 1, may statement 2. So if the condition has met the statement, it proceeds to statement 1, and if it's false, it proceeds to statement 2. Ganon yung selection, may choices ka, unlike sa sequence wala. This is like the two-way statement. So dito naman tayo sa repetition. I will be discussing this later naman, so we have all the time. So expression, as you can see, ulit lang siya, repetition nga eh. So let's proceed to selection muna. So selection has an what we call if and the if else statement. Diba? Ito yung one-way selection. If statement. So if you are not familiar with this, you should be familiar with this already because we've been using this in our machine problems and homeworks and fieldworks. So now, although there are only two logical values, these are the true and false. They are still useful. They program the processing flow, as you can see here in this illustration. So the first thing we will be discussing is the flow of if statement. Oh wait, what is this? So by now we are familiar with using the if statement because we've been using it in our semester. It is also the most basic flow statement among all of them. Now that we know that there is a one-way type of selection of if statement, then there must be a two-way as well. Hence, we call it an if-else statement. If-else statement. Now, so in an if-else statement, we can have two alternatives. We can, as you can see in this illustration, statement 1, statement 2. Two options. Unlike in the if statement, which only has an statement 1, which if the expression is true, proceeds to statement 1. And if it's false, it terminates the program. So to have a better understanding of the flow of execution of an if-else statement, here is an example of an if-else statement that I took in our reference book that mom has shared us. So the following program determines an employee's weekly wages if the hours worked exceed 40. Wages include overtime payment. As you can see here, we've used the if-else statement, which is two-way. Kasi may two choices, two statements. As you can see, if the hour is greater than 40, wages would equal to 40 times the rate plus else naman ito yung statement 2 na tinatawag natin, wage is equals to hours times rate. So yun lang yung basics ng if-else statement. Pwede mong gamitin to other ways around. We can use it to manipulate an if-else inside an if-else, which we'll be discussing later din naman because I will be covering the entire semester. So next, compound statement. So suppose that you want to execute more than just two statements. Now C++ provides a structure called the compound statement or a block of statements. Now compound statement takes the following form: nested if and the if-else statement. This is our type of compound statement. As you can see in this illustration, we have statement 1, statement 2, multiple statements. First, we move on to the nested if and if-else statement. Ito yung minimin ko inside the if. So what if there is a way to write an if-else statement inside an if-else statement? Inside an if-else statement, gets new. So here, as you can see, we can have multiple sections or sequence of the given statements, and that is called the nested if and if-else statements. So here's an example of an if-else statement. So as you can see, pairing the if with an else is the rule in an is nested if-else statement. Kailangan naka-pair siya. Wait. Ito pala. So as you can see, else if month is equals to ito, magsi-see out siya now, February. May condition siya before the condition starts, before the expression, ito siya, else if, then else if, then else if, then else if. So dito naman tayo sa switch structure. So dito na sa switch structure, we recall there are two selection structures in C++. So the first selection structure is implemented with if and if else statements, and I've shown you earlier. So the second selection structure does not require the evaluation of logical expression. Now this is what we call the switch structure. Basically, C++ switch structure gives the in selection, the switch structure gives the how will I say this? Gives the alternatives, kumbaga. Marami siyang alternatives. As you can see, may case 1, case 2, case 3. So mas madali din gamitin yung yung switch case statement kasi parang mas organized siya, unlike sa if else. So C++ gives the computer the power to choose from among many alternatives. Yun yung pinagkaiba nila, unlike sa if else na dito sa switch structure, mag-enter ka ng value which will determine what case would you choose, what case would you prefer. So here's a general syntax of switch structure, as you can see in this illustration. Each case specifies different actions, and then as you can see highlighted here at the bottom of the cake, each cases is what we call break. So ano nga ba ang break? Break siya yung kumbaga siya yung nag-force ng, it causes the exit of the each cases, each of the structure of the switch case value. Kumbaga case value 1, after the running of the statement 1, we break para hindi siya dire-diretso sa case value 2. Kasi kung walang break yan, diretso siya sa case value 2, which is statement 2. And then kung walang break yung case number 2, diretso siya sa so on and so forth. So patungo naman tayo sa what we call repetition. I hope you guys are still there because mahaba-haba pa yung discussion. Now repetition, or what we call looping. Basically while, these are while, do while, and for. Ito yung nagagamit natin to what we call, repeating operations, kumbaga. Kasi so I'll just suppose lang na you want to add 10 numbers. 10 numbers. Ang gagawin mo, mag-encode ka ng int different types of variables, and that would be very costly kasi masyadong mahaba. Pero since 10 numbers lang naman, kaya mo. Pero what if 100 yung numbers na i-add? Bali 110 ang i-declare mo na variable. As you can see, parang masyado namang hassle. Hence, we have the repetition to do the job for us. The easy way around. Now, C++ has 3 repetitions. We have uh, a while loop, as you can see. These what we call looping structures that lets us repeat the statements over and over until conditions have been met. So let's start with the while loop na lang. So how does while loop work anyway? As you can see here in the illustration, we can see that we use the expression as a decision maker. Whether the condition is true, given is true, then it will process to the body of the loop, and then the loop of which is the statement, and then go back to the square one. Here pala. Here we see the while loop. If the statement is true, it proceeds to statement. If the expression is true, it proceeds to the statement and then goes back. Paulit-ulit lang yan. And then if the statement is not what we call this, if the statement is no longer true, the loop breaks. Mag-stop na yung breaks. It reduces a false. But beware of using while loop as if may different types of pag magkamali ka gumamit ng while loop, it can continuously what we call this, continuously run, which is what we call the infinite loop. Yes, infinite loop. So I've shown you the idea of how the while loops flow execution work. But when designing a while loop in our program, there are a variety of cases in different situations to use while loop. But since we're in short of time, I just summarize the some of these cases. As you can see, I've written here case 1, which is the counter controlled while loops. So as you can see, counter is not must be greater than or equal to n. So suppose that a set of statements needs to be executed n times. You can set up a counter to track how many times have been rendered. Gets new counter. Then the counter gets compared by the number of value you input. So it continues to execute until the counter is equal to the number of the value. So yun, ito yung case 1. This one I use often before kasi na it is very what do you call this? It's very easy and understandable to operate with. Case 2 naman is the Sentinel controlled while loop. In this case, as you can see, variable is not equal to Sentinel. So gets nyo this case kasi it's the opposite way around sa first case kasi if the item does not equal to the Sentinel, the body of the while of the statement dun siya mag-execute. If the statement is not equal to the Sentinel, dun siya mag-execute, unlike sa case 1. So we've used this also previously in our machine problem. So I bet you are also aware of how this case works in while loop. Now there are more useful cases, such as the third case, which is the flag controlled while loop. As you can see here, flag is equals to true or false. So basically it uses bool variable to determine if a statement is true or false. So in a body of a loop when executed. So lastly, we have the case 4, which is the EOF, or what we call end of file controlled while loop. So we use this when reading a file. So I haven't really, I haven't particularly used this case. So I am not fond of using this one. So as you can see, we have the do while loop and then the for loop. So the second loop is the do while. Okay, we don't have a slide for that. We don't have. So the second loop, or the second repetition, is the do while loop, which is the same with the while loop, except pinakaiba nila is that the body of a loop ng do while loop, kumbaga yung uh, statement niya is yung mauuna. After nung statement, yung ano naman niya, yung expression na, so mauna yung body of the loop before the condition. So the expression is only used here to for the loop to work. So gets nyo naman yung meaning ko. For loop naman, this is the third repetition, or the third loop. Sa for loop, this is a form of a while loop, but is most convenient with counting loops. Example is loops that are based on counting variable, usually a known number of iterations. So here is a general form of for loop. As you can see, initial statement, loop condition. Ito yung loop condition, kung anong condition natin. Initial statement, we can declare int I, which it starts with the initial statement, and then update statement, pwede natin lagyan ng increment or decrement for C++, plus plus, or negative, which I will be discussing later then. So to review the three repetitions, while and for loops are called the pretest loops because nauna yung expression before the body of the loop or statement. On the other hand, yung do while loop naman is post-test loop dahil nauna yung statement bago yung condition ng loop, ng while, which is the statement, which is the expression or condition. Do while is what we call post-test loop. Also note that when dealing with loops, we have to use the break statement at the last in the body of the loop to terminate the loop. With that, kumbaga, naglo-loop siya. Kung gusto mo i-terminate, mag-break ka na. Kasi kung walang break, I don't think na it will work conveniently. So with that, we are done with loops and we move on to functions. And medyo mahaba rin yung discussion ng functions. So what is a function in C++? Now there are two types of functions, mainly. These are the standard function in C++ and the user-defined function. So we define standard function first. But first we define functions. Functions are like miniature programs and are called the modules. It enables you to divide a program into manageable tasks. So as you can see, functions, we have been using different types of functions. If you are not aware what a function is, we have used the main function, which is the first function that we've been using. Now, to define the predefined function, as you can see, are organized into separate libraries. Ito yung predefined function or the standard function natin sa C++. Ito yung example niya, IOStream, CMAT, ito yung mga library or the header, what we call header. So, ito yung it means that to use a standard predefined function, kailangan alam natin yung pangalan ng header file na insert natin for the function's specification. And then number 2, we have to include the header file in the program. And then lastly, the third one, we have to know the name and type of the function and number types of the parameters, which is the arguments inside the type of functions that we've written. So here is a basic flow of a standard function. Rather, these are the two different types of function. Predefined function, we use the standard function, has library function, declaration in header files, and body in DLL files. User-defined function naman has user-defined function to reduce complexity, as you can see in this picture. So here naman are the predefined functions of different types of header files of a function. So as you can see here, we have CMath, ang function ng CMath header file is rather the function ops is used in a header file of CMath. As you can see, different types of header file of a function. Ito namang function CL, which is in the header file of CMath. Then, as you can see, returns the smallest of a whole number. So, ganun yun yung predefined function. We need a header file, and then we also use the parameter type, which is the as you can see here, different parameter types and different header functions, different types of functions. Double sa CL, as you can see, int is absolute value. So moving on naman tayo sa user-defined functions now. There are two types of user-defined functions. We have the value returning functions and the void functions. So value returning functions is the functions that have a return type. As you have seen, the int main function may return type siya. This function return a value of a specific data type using the return statements, which we will explain shortly. Second one is the void functions. I've shown you a pic of what I have defined the void, what it means, which is the nothingness. Now it means in a function that void does not have a return type. So as we have used this function, we know that it doesn't return any value unless called. This function do not use a return statement to return a value. So as you can see in the illustration, we have our function parameters of a user-defined function. Here we have different types of return type. Here we have float. Then we have the function name, which is what we name the function. Ito yung function declaration, what we call function declaration. So ito yung float niya is yung parameter type, and then the parameter names, what we write here, and then parameter type ulit. Then the width, which is the parameter name. Then terminating with the semicolon, which is special symbol, as I've mentioned earlier. So basically, these are the variables defined in a function heading. They are called parameters. Ito. So here, as you can see, is how we call a function. Also, since we use void, it is not going to return any value. As you can see here, void is how we use a user-defined function. function of a void. So, as you can see, wala siyang return type. Ito yung function call. We call on the function in the int main. So, kung wala to, hindi siya maglalabas. Hindi lalabas yung void. So, we have to call on the display number, which is num1, num2. Then, as you can see, they have the same to parehas lang siya dito. Kasi dalawa yung insert mo dito, dalawa rin yung lalabas sa int mo. So, next slide. So for the programming example of the user-defined function, you can see here ito yung example of user-defined function. This program finds the largest number of a set of 10 numbers, as you can see here, 10 numbers. We declare ito yung what we call the function definition. Ito yung function definition, then function prototype natin, ito. Here yung variable to hold the largest number, yun. So ito siya, yung function. How we use a user-defined function. We declare, then as you can see here, this is the main function of the function definition. So, to review the functions, since we are almost done with the functions enables you to divide the program into manageable tasks. That's what we use functions for now. C++ systems provides the two types of function, which is the standard function. To use a standard function, you must know the name of the header file of the program, and then know the name type of the function and number types of parameters. So, a value returning function returns its value via what we call the return statement. Also note that a function prototype is the function heading without the body of the function. The function prototype ends with semicolon, as usual. Function prototypes appear before any function definition. So, ito yung pinaka-taas, function prototype. Now, user-defined function execute only when they are called. And with that, we move on to our last topic of our discussion, alhamdulillah, which involves the use of array and strings. So, let's see. Array muna tayo. An array is a collection of fixed number of components, all of the same data type. One-dimensional array is an array in which the components are arranged in a list form. Arrays of 2 dimensions will be discussed later. So, as you can see, arrays can be useful when making a list of data. Kumbaga, for example, is gagawa tayo ng data for scores ng students. So, kumbaga, nag-store siya ng scores ng student, test scores. So, imagine kung ang estudyante mo ay 100 plus. Doon natin siya magagamit kasi hindi mo siya doon useful yung arrays, yes, the arrays. Doon siya useful. How will we keep track of their scores kung walang array, di ba? So, as you can see in the illustration, general form for declaring a one-dimensional array is, as you can see, the data type, and then the array name, and then int x, in which int x is any constant expression that evaluates to a positive integer. Also, int x specifies the number of components in the array. So, also note that dito sa int x in array is integer lang ang nilalagay natin dito sa int x, which is in the parent bracket. The statement int num5, as you can see, is declares a array number of 5 components. Each component is of type int. The components are num0, num1, num2, num3, num4, num5. So in C++, the index starts at 0. So if you declared 5 components, as you can see in the illustration, 5 components ang i-declare niya. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here the first element is 0. So as you can see, num is 0. So next element is 2. As the index is 1. 1 is index 1. Rather ito. So 1, 2, ito 0, 1. So gets nyo naman. Index niya is 0, element niya is 1. Index niya is 1, element niya is 2. So ganun siya. Ganun yung one-dimensional array. So on and so forth. Kasi it starts with 0 talaga in C++. So here we have like any other simple variable, an array can be initialized while it is being declared. For example, the following C++ statement declares an array sales of 5 components and initializes these components. So as you can see here, double sales 5. So to initialize a value, it is placed in a curly bracket, as you can see here. Ayan. May curly bracket siya. So bakit 5? Kasi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 yung nilagay na digits. 5 yung nilagay na value. So kung what happens when you partially initialize a value? Kumbaga, partially, what I mean by partially is this. In this illustration, which is the int list, naglagay siya ng 10, pero isa lang yung nilagay niya na value. Ang mangyayari dyan, declares list to be an array of 10 components and initializes all of the components to 0. Gets nyo? Kasi, bakit 0? Kasi kung walang value siya, maglalagay pa rin siya ng 10 components. Ito. Until mag 10 na siya. So, bale 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 0 yung ilalagay niya na value. So, ito naman. As you can see here, the base address of an array is to the address is the memory location. So I'm not familiar. So of the first array component, for example, if list is a one-dimensional array, then the base address of list is the address of the component list 0. Consider the following statement: int my list. This statement declares my list to be an array of 5 components of type int. The components are my list 0, tapos my list is 1, my list 2, my list 3, my list is 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bali 5 yan. 5 lang yan. The value computer allocates 5 memory spaces, each large enough to store an int value. For these components, moreover, the 5 memory spaces are contiguous. So, dito naman, we can also use the constant int. So, ganitong paggamit ng constant int. We can store it into our index kung anong nilagay natin sa constant integer. Now, there are two ways of initializing arrays. So, in implicit array sizing, what will determine the what will determine the size of an array? Ito yung naka-highlight. Ito. 197. So there are two ways of initializing arrays. Explicit and implicit. Sa explicit array sizing, square bracket contains numerical constant. Sa implicit array sizing naman, square brackets are empty. Empty yung square brackets. Ito. The size of an array is indicated implicitly by the number of the elements on the right side of the assignment operator. Ito siya. Ito yung nagde-determine ang number of elements. Kung implicit yung array sizing natin. So, here naman in declaring a variable, they do not allow variable to declare the size of an array. So, dapat number lang. As you can see, invalid to, illegal. Kasi most compilers do not allow the use of variable to declare the size of an array. It must be a number lang. So now let's talk about the two-dimensional array. A two-dimensional array is a collection of fixed number of components arranged in rows and columns that is in 2 dimensions, wherein all components are of the same type. The syntax for declaring a two-dimensional array, as you can see here, ito yung illustration ng syntax. Data type muna, anong data type mo isusulat mo? Integer, float, anong data type? Array name naman, anong array name na? And then as you can see, int x1, int x2, int expressions yung nilalagay dyan. Where int x1 and int x2 are constant expression yielding to positive integer values. The two expression int x1 and int x2 specify the number of rows and the number of columns and respectively in the array. So where int x and int x1 constant are, yun nga, kumbaga gano'n, constant siya. Constant lang yung nilalagay dyan. This array we have what we call in this two-dimensional array nga, ito yung tinatawag natin a row and column respectively. Int x1 and int x2 is a row and a column respectively. So here's a program that consists of two-dimensional array. The statement of double cells, it declares two-dimensional arrays of 10 rows and 5 columns. As you can see, here are the rows which are 10, but since our index starts at 0, ends at 9. And then the same case with the column, which starts at 0 and ends at 4. Since we have 5 columns, we also have 5 elements. Now, moving on naman tayo. N-dimensional array or the multi-dimension n-dimensional array is a collection of a fixed number of elements called components arranged in n dimension. As you can see, ito yung what we call this. N is greater than or equal to 1. A general syntax for declaring an n-dimensional array is data type muna, tapos yung array name, tapos yung int x po. Until int x hanggang sa gusto mo. Where int x until int x n are constant expressions. Yes, kailangan constant expressions lang siya of positive integer values. So you can use the loops for multidimensional arrays. Also note that when declaring a multidimensional array as a formal parameter in a function, you can omit, kumbaga you can size the first dimension but not the other dimension. If I'm not mistaken, kasi now we have yet to use the multidimensional arrays in our activities. So I hope I didn't get things complicated. Anyways, moving on. So since we're dealing with arrays, we might as well introduce strings, which is one of the most useful data types since supplied in the C++ library is the string. A string is a variable that stores a sequence of letters. As I've mentioned earlier, na the differences of char and strings is that string stores more capable of storing any letter, such as hello, or such as sentences like May 10th is my birthday. Just like the other data types, to create a string, we first declare it. Then we can store a value in it. So string is a collection of characters, basically. Yun yung similarities nila. String is a collection of characters. Now there are two types of strings commonly used in C++ programming. These are strings in C++, the standard C++, and other standard C++ library string, and then the C strings, which is magde-declare muna tayo ng header bago natin siya magagamit. In order to use the string data type, the C++ string header must be included at the top of the program. Instead of using sin function, you get the entered line or of text using getLine. So nagamit rin natin to, getLine. This is what ma'am has mentioned before. So here are the types of functions, type of string functions, the two string functions. As you can see, here is the C style string. This is a null type, null, tawag doon, null, null siya. As you can see, char E with the array, kailangan it consists of arrays din yung C style string, gigs, and then char E1, as you can see, and then char times gigs for gigs. So ito rin ako, C++ style string, string siya. Ito yung common grounds ng string plus C++ ng string. Sulat ka lang ng string, tapos name ng string, which is str, and then yun, lalabas na siya. As you can see, ito yung example niya. So C strings in C programming, the collection of characters is stored in the form of arrays. This is also supported in C++ programming, hence it's called a C string. So C strings are array types siya. Char terminated with null character. Ito yung minimin ko na null character. That is, as you can see here, is what we call a null character. So alternative ways of defining a string, as you can see here in this example. As you can see here is char string. Isa lang siya. as you can see here, in the first line, char string, we input four uh, character index as 4, tapos yung element niya is 3 lang. Bakit kaya yun? Kasi may null character siya, which is the fourth fourth element. Dito naman fourth element, gets nyo naman yung minimin ko. So char string naman, as you can see, we can not write input, what we call this, we can have this 0. We don't have a value here, so as you can see here, yeah, ganun lang siya. Alternative ways of defining a string. So here's an example of string using a string data type, passing string to a function, C++ string to read a line of text. Okay. This string is used to pass string to a function. As you can see, declaring a string object, string, tapos enter a string, tapos ayun, get line. Instead na cin, nag-input tayo ng get line of cin string. Ito lang yung basics ng string. I haven't introduced the other functions of string, such as str copy, which copies the string, other type of string like string cat, str length. Marami kasi yung string uses natin. So we've come to the end of the slides, which is the last topic natin. So I will be discussing the mathematical series naman tayo, which is the programming na binigay ni ma'am sa atin. So I'll just open up my online GDB to access the file that I've made for the programming. Mag-charge lang din ako. Hindi pala ako na-connect. Connect muna tayo. As you can see, masyadong mabagal. So, let's see. Nawala na naman. Ito yung mathematical series, which includes the Fibonacci operators series. Let's refresh na lang kasi hindi natin makita ng maayos. Fibonacci series, prime numbers, and what you call this, the factorial. Ito yung pinili ko pong C++ program to discuss kasi na I've mastered the use of switch case statement, such as and use of loops. So I think this is the easiest one among all of them. So mahina po ata ang signal, so wait lang po. Ayun, nag-load. So let's start with our program. So as you can see, I have entered the menu, which show menu of our mathematical series. How about I say mathematical operation na lang, since these are mathematical operations. The first case, this is the void show menu. Kahit nilagay mo sa taas, hindi siya magre-read unless called in the main function. So, void show menu, nilagay ko sa int main, which is here, show menu. Now, our menu consists of 4 functions, which is Fibonacci series, prime numbers, factorial, and exit, which exits the program of the loop, kasi naka-loop tayo eh. So, firstly, in the main function, we have declared the different types of integer variables that we will be using and different type of operations. And then the second one we did is sorry for skipping this, by the way, because I've discussed this over and over again. So that's like a common sense na. So here we use the do while loop. Ito yung loop na ginamit natin. So as you can see, we have declared show menu. It's a part of the loop. Since we have declared show menu, lalabas to. And then mag-see out tayo ng choose options. So paglabas ng show menu, choose options. Choose option, and then mag-input tayo ng option, as you can see. Let's try running the program. Mahina ang signal. Nako. Ayun. Mathematical operations. Ito yung option niya. Fibonacci series, prime numbers, factorial, or exit. So mag-choose tayo ng options. Mag-exit muna ako. So, I just showed you the example. Mahina na naman. Anyways, yun. So, case 1 tayo. Switch case. So, if ang option niya is 1, case 1 tayo, dito tayo papasok. Case 1. So, mag-see out ng enter the n value. So, since we're dealing with the Fibonacci series, as you can see, is the case 1, mag-output siya ng Fibonacci series variable of n1 and 2. Now, here starts the Fibonacci series. Since Fibonacci is the collection of a sum of numbers, kumbaga, ito yung formula niya. n1 plus n2 is the next term. Then, maglalagay tayo ng loop dito. While next term must be less than or equal to n, mag-see out tayo ng next term, tapos ito, comma, and then ilalagay natin yung value ng n1, iset natin sa equal lang value ng n2, tapos yung value ng n2 is kukunin natin yung value ng n1, i-assign natin sa value ng n2 para alternate siya ba, kumbaga para dire-diretso na yung takbo ng program natin, kasi di ba, mag-sum siya. So ano yung value ng next term? Ang value ng next term is yung sum nung n1 plus n2 natin. So ang minimin ko is kung ang n1 is 1, malalagay siya sa n2 is equals to 1. Rather, ang value ng n2 is 1, magiging value ng n1 is equals to 1. nag-assign siya ng value sa N1. So magpo-proceed siya sa N1. And then, proceed na naman siya sa N2. Kumbaga, mag-switch siya. Kukunin niya yung value. I know it's hard to grasp the concept of Fibonacci series, pero madali lang siya. I-try natin gamitin. Run our program. Wait lang, para bumilis yung signal. So, number 1, let's choose the option 1. Ay nako, wala talaga. Mahirap talaga magpakita. Mahirap. So yun, ganun talaga siya. Tapos mag-see out ako ng end line para ma-disconnect siya dito. Tapos break na tayo. Mag-end line ako para may space line siya. May ma-separate siya ba. Tapos case 2 naman. In our case 2 is our operation of prime numbers, which will determine the prime number. So, ginawa ko sa case 2, mag-see out ako, enter the end value, mag-see in siya ng end, mag-see out ng prime numbers. So, ang prime numbers natin is kung anong nilagay na value, mag-start siya sa num 1, from 0 to n, diba? So, I've set the conditions. As you can see, num is equals to 2 because it's what you call a prime number. Equal siya sa 2. Num must be less than or equal to the value that you've input. Tapos, mag-plus siya ng number. Mag-increment para diretso na. It's a loop kasi, for loop. So, as you can see here, I've declared that I is equals to 2. I must be less than 2. Then num divided by 2. Mag-increment din siya. If num is a module, what do you call this? Remainder of I is equal to 0, I must equal to num. Then mag-break. Dito siya mag-print. If I is not equal to number, see out num, tapos spacebar. So, mag-spacebar siya. Run natin. Para guys, mahirap kasi explain pag di nyo nakikita yung ginagawa niya. Ginagawa niyang operations. So, run natin yung number 2. Grabe kahina ng signal, oy. Enter the value, 72, 76. Wala talaga eh, ayaw mag-run ng ano. So, ayun. Prime numbers natin from, we've entered the value, 76. Tapos, ang prime numbers natin, ito. Ito yung prime numbers natin from 0 to 76. So, mag-stop na tayo. Case 3 naman, enter the end value. So, nag-see-in ako ng value. Ang condition niya, since we're dealing with factorial, int a, and I declare the value of and equal it, set it to 1, a must be less than or equal to n. Meaning is the value must be less than or equal to n, which is what the value we inputted, and then mag-increment siya, add. So ang condition niya ito, ang body niya is ito, factorial is equal to factorial times a, since factorial is mag-time siya, yung factorial mag-time siya, tapos yung mahirap kasi ito i-explain yung process ng operation ng factorial. kumbaga naging punta ako ng 5, magta-time siya. Run na lang natin so you'll get my point of mahirap kasi explain tong mga mathematical series. You will get the idea when I show you the example. So ayun yung mag-run. Run natin ulit. Oh no, nag-end. Mahina talaga yung signal. Naku. So, as you can see, yung do while, may while na naman tayo sa huli. Kasi, ito yung statement natin, expression natin. While option is not equal to 4. If nag-enter tayo ng 4, mag-exit siya. So, hanggang doon na lang kasi mahina talaga yung signal eh. Talagang mag-run eh. So, this is my program. As you can see, it's not having any errors naman. So, I think that's the end of the final project and I'll be ending this. So, thanks for watching.